Montana Territory, 1875. The wind carried whispers of winter across the valley as Virgil Prentice rode toward the growing settlement of Whitewater Springs. At 26, he'd already lived 3 lifetimes worth of solitude. The long shadow of his past stretched behind him like the evening sun across the plains. His father's name and the bloody legacy attached to it had taught him one immutable truth. A man with his history had no business seeking roots, connections, or, God forbid, love. The last 5 years spent drifting from ranch to ranch, town to town, had hardened this belief into an unshakable principle. Trust was a luxury for those who hadn't seen their family name become synonymous with frontier vengeance. Even now, as he approached this promising new settlement, Virgil kept his true identity close, adopting his mother's maiden name when introducing himself to strangers. He adjusted his worn Stetson, concealing eyes the color of a mountain lake under its brim. His lean frame carried the strength of years breaking horses and driving cattle, though his face retained a youthfulness that belied the weight he carried. A week's worth of light stubble shadowed his jaw and trailed dust clung to his denim and leather. Whitewater Springs emerged before him, a cluster of wooden buildings, some newly painted, others weathered by Montana seasons. The settlement boasted what many frontier towns lacked, a sense of permanence. A schoolhouse stood near a church with a freshly constructed steeple. The general store, saloon, and various businesses lined a main street that seemed more civilized than most he'd passed through. What Virgil sought was temporary work, enough to replenish his supplies before moving on as winter descended. What he needed, though he'd never admit it even to himself, was something to fill the hollow ache that grew with each passing season of solitude. "No point in dreaming," he muttered to his horse, a sturdy buckskin gelding named Chance. "We get supplies, find work, and keep moving. That's how we stay alive." The horse snorted in response as they approached the livery stable at the edge of town. Inside the stables, a grizzled older man with one arm introduced himself as Cooper. "Need your mount looked after?" "Yes, sir, and information about work if you have any." Cooper nodded. "Timing's good. The widow Blackwell at Silverleaf Ranch lost her foreman last month. Word is she's looking for experienced hands before winter." "How far?" 3 miles north. You can't miss it. Big white house with a red barn. The widow inherited it when her husband passed 2 years back. She's young but determined. Runs it with her sister now." Virgil nodded his thanks, paid for Chance's care, and secured a room at the modest boarding house. After a real bath and a change of clothes, he decided to visit the Silverleaf the following morning. One season's work would provide enough savings to see him through to spring. That evening, he entered Whitewater's only real restaurant, a modest establishment attached to the hotel, seeking a proper meal before tomorrow's interview. The savory aromas of roasted meat and fresh bread filled the air as Virgil stepped inside, removing his hat respectfully. The dining room was half filled with townspeople enjoying their evening meals. He found an empty table near the window and seated himself, grateful for the relative anonymity. "Good evening. May I bring you coffee to start?" The voice drew his attention upward, and for a moment, Virgil forgot the practiced detachment he'd maintained for years. The young woman standing beside his table wore a simple blue dress that complemented eyes the color of summer cornflowers. Her honey-blonde hair was neatly pinned back, with a few wayward strands framing her face. She couldn't have been more than 22, with a gentle smile that seemed genuine rather than performed. "Yes, ma'am, coffee would be welcome," he managed. "You're new to Whitewater," she observed, not as a question but a friendly statement. "I'm Dahlia Bennett. My sister and I run this establishment." "Virgil," he replied, purposely omitting his surname as had become his habit. "Just arrived today." "Well, Virgil, our special tonight is venison stew with biscuits. The stew's my recipe, and I'd recommend it after a day of travel." "That sounds perfect, thank you." She nodded and moved away to fetch his coffee, leaving Virgil with an unexpected sense of disquiet. Something about her direct gaze and unguarded manner had momentarily penetrated the careful distance he maintained from others. When Dahlia returned with coffee and stew, he found himself watching her interactions with other patrons. She moved through the room with easy confidence, addressing most customers by name, exchanging brief pleasantries without slowing her work. This wasn't the practiced charm of a saloon girl or the stiff formality of Eastern establishments. She treated each person with simple dignity, from the well-dressed banker to the weathered ranch hand. The stew proved as good as promised, rich with herbs and vegetables stored for winter. Virgil found himself lingering over the meal, something he rarely did in public establishments where he preferred to remain unnoticed. As the dinner hour wound down and patrons departed, Dahlia approached his table again. "Would you care for pie? We have apple today." "No, thank you, the stew was excellent." She smiled, beginning to clear his dishes. "What brings you to Whitewater? Most travelers pass through to Helena this time of year." "Looking for winter work. I heard the Silverleaf Ranch might be hiring." Something flickered across her face, surprise perhaps. "The Silverleaf? Yes, my sister needs capable hands before winter sets in." "Your sister?" "Eliza Blackwell, she owns the Silverleaf. I help with the ranch accounts when I'm not here at the restaurant." Virgil nodded, processing this connection. The livery owner mentioned she lost her foreman. "Yes, Thomas took ill suddenly. He'd been with the ranch since before my brother-in-law died." Her expression softened with remembered grief. "It's been difficult for Eliza, managing alone." "I'm sorry for your family's loss." Dahlia studied him with sudden intensity. "You have ranch experience." 10 years working cattle. Wyoming, Colorado, sometime in Texas." "Then you should definitely speak with Eliza. She values experience over talk." She hesitated, then added, "I could introduce you tomorrow if you'd like. I'm riding out in the morning with supplies." Common sense told Virgil to decline. His plans never included personal connections or complicated arrangements. But practical considerations won out. An introduction from family would likely secure the position. "That's kind of you, Miss Bennett. What time should I be ready?" 8 o'clock at the livery, and please call me Dahlia. Miss Bennett makes me feel like the schoolteacher. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Virgil felt a genuine smile form. 8 o'clock it is, Dahlia." That night, lying on the boarding house bed, Virgil stared at the ceiling, unaccountably restless. Something about Whitewater Springs felt different from the countless other towns he'd passed through. Perhaps it was the settlement's air of permanence, the sense that people came here to build lives rather than merely extract what they could before moving on. Or perhaps it was the unexpected connection to the ranch through the restaurant owner with the direct blue gaze. Dahlia Bennett had a quality he rarely encountered on the frontier, a genuine warmth untainted by desperation or calculation. Her sister, the widow Blackwell, would likely be a different matter. Ranch owners, in his experience, were hardened by necessity. One season, he reminded himself aloud. "We work through winter, then move on before anyone starts asking questions." The following morning dawned clear and cold. Frost sparkled on the boardwalks as Virgil made his way to the livery, his breath forming clouds in the air. Cooper had Chance saddled and waiting, alongside a sprightly bay mare already fitted with panniers. "Miss Bennett mentioned you'd be riding together to the Silverleaf," Cooper said with a knowing look that Virgil chose to ignore. "She offered an introduction to her sister." Smart move, the widow values Dahlia's judgment. Virgil was checking Chance's girth when he heard approaching footsteps. Turning, he momentarily lost his practiced composure for the second time in 24 hours. Dahlia Bennett, in riding clothes, presented an entirely different figure from the restaurant hostess. She wore a practical divided riding skirt and fitted jacket in deep green wool. Her honey blonde hair was braided and pinned up beneath a wide-brimmed hat. The morning light emphasized the healthy glow of her complexion and the clear blue of her eyes. "Good morning, Virgil." "I see Cooper has maple ready for me." She patted the bay mare's neck affectionately. "Morning, thank you again for the introduction." "It's no trouble. The ride gives me a chance to deliver these supplies and check the ranch accounts." She indicated the panniers. "Eliza gets too busy to come to town some weeks." Cooper helped Dahlia mount, then handed her the reins. Virgil swung into his own saddle and they rode out of town together, following a well-used road northward. The morning air was bracing, the landscape golden with autumn. As they rode, Dahlia pointed out landmarks: the creek that fed the town's water supply, the ridge where wolves sometimes appeared in winter, the distant outline of the Blackwell homestead. How long have you lived in Whitewater? Virgil asked, finding himself genuinely curious. 4 years. Eliza married James Blackwell and moved here first. After our parents died in 71, I joined her. She glanced at him. And you, where do you call home? The familiar question usually triggered his well-rehearsed vagueness, but something about the clear morning and her straightforward manner prompted unexpected honesty. I was born in Colorado, haven't had a fixed home in years. The wandering cowboy, she observed without judgment, we see many passing through. Most don't stay. Some do. Whitewater has a way of catching people when they're ready to stop running. The comment, delivered without emphasis, nevertheless struck uncomfortably close to truth. Virgil shifted in his saddle. I'm not running from anything, just following work. Her smile suggested polite disbelief. Of course, though in my experience, men who follow work without attachment are usually leaving something behind as well. Before he could respond, she pointed ahead to where the road curved around a stand of aspens. There, that's Silverleaf. The ranch spread before them, a substantial operation by Montana standards. The main house stood 2 stories tall, painted white with green trim as Cooper had described. Behind it, a large red barn and several outbuildings formed a tidy compound. Beyond these structures, fenced pastures extended toward distant hills. Cattle grazed in the nearest field and smoke rose from the bunkhouse chimney. Eliza runs about 200 head, Dahlia explained. Smaller than some spreads, but the stock is quality. James had good breeding sense. As they approached the main house, a woman emerged onto the porch. Even from a distance, Virgil could see the family resemblance to Dahlia, though this woman's posture held a different quality, watchful, reserved. That's Eliza, Dahlia confirmed. Let me speak with her first. They dismounted in the yard. A young stable hand appeared to take their horses as Dahlia led Virgil toward the house. The sister's greeting was warm but tinged with visible exhaustion. I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow, Eliza said, embracing Dahlia briefly. She was perhaps 25, with the same blonde hair as her sister, though hers was pulled back severely. Her dress, though feminine, had the practical quality of a woman who worked alongside her hands. I brought supplies and a potential foreman, Dahlia replied, gesturing to Virgil. This is Virgil. He arrived in town yesterday with impressive experience. Eliza Blackwell's assessment was thorough and unflinching as she extended her hand. Mrs. Blackwell, you've worked cattle before. Yes, ma'am. 10 years across several territories. Come inside, we'll discuss particulars. The interior of the main house reflected both prosperity and practicality. The parlor where Eliza led them contained good furniture softened by use, bookshelves filled with actual books, and a desk covered with ledgers and papers. Please sit, Dahlia. Would you check on Katie? She's been asking for you all morning. As Dahlia left the room, Eliza's formal demeanor softened slightly. My daughter, she's 6 and adores her aunt. The interview proceeded efficiently. Eliza asked pointed questions about his experience, knowledge of winter cattle management, and ability to supervise the 5 hands currently employed at Silverleaf. Virgil answered honestly about his skills, omitting only personal history. Your references, she finally asked. I can provide names of previous employers, though sending telegrams would take time. Eliza considered this. Normally I'd insist, but winter's approaching and I need someone who understands Montana conditions. She paused. I notice you haven't mentioned your surname. The moment Virgil had learned to dread in every new place arrived. Prentice, he said after a barely perceptible hesitation. Virgil Prentice. If the name registered any significance, Eliza Blackwell didn't show it. Well, Mr. Prentice, Dahlia's assessment of character carries weight with me. The position pays $30 monthly with room and board in the foreman's cabin. You'd have authority over the hands but answer to me in all matters concerning the ranch. That's fair. There's one condition, she continued. I require a season's commitment through spring roundup. Silverleaf can't afford another disruption this winter. Virgil hesitated. He rarely committed beyond a month or 2, preserving the freedom to move on if whispers about his family name began. But the approaching winter limited options, and the Silverleaf offered legitimate work with fair terms. Agreed, through spring roundup. Good, Eliza stood, offering her hand again. You can move your things to the foreman's cabin today. Tomorrow morning, we'll ride the property so you understand our operation before snow flies. Their conversation was interrupted by the patter of small feet. A young girl with blonde braids burst into the room, followed by a smiling Dahlia. Mama, Aunt Dahlia brought peppermint sticks. Katie, we have a visitor, mind your manners, Eliza admonished gently. The child stopped, noticing Virgil for the first time. Rather than showing shyness, she studied him with frank curiosity. Are you our new foreman? Mr. Thomas went to heaven, and the cows have been very naughty without him. Despite himself, Virgil smiled. Yes, miss, I'm Virgil Prentice, and I'll do my best to keep the cows in line. Good. They need a firm hand, she declared with such serious conviction that both adults struggled to maintain composure. Dahlia laughed openly. She repeats everything she hears from the hands. The child's presence had transformed Eliza, softening the businesslike demeanor into something warmer. Watching the three of them, Eliza's protective affection, Dahlia's easy manner with her niece, the child's uninhibited joy, Virgil felt the familiar ache of witnessing something he believed forever beyond his reach: family. I should retrieve my belongings from town, he said, standing. I'll return before sundown to meet the hands. I'll ride back with you, Dahlia offered. I need to prepare for the dinner service. They departed after a flurry of goodbyes from Katie and final instructions from Eliza. As they rode toward town, Virgil found himself more at ease than he'd been in years, though a persistent voice warned against complacency. Silverleaf might offer temporary sanctuary, but experience had taught him that peace never lasted once his true identity emerged. You're very quiet, Dahlia observed as they neared town, having second thoughts about the position. No, your sister runs an impressive operation. She does everything well, always has, even grieving. A shadow crossed Dahlia's face. James's death nearly destroyed her, but she never let Katie see her break, not once. Virgil considered this. Loss changes people. Yes, it does, her gaze turned thoughtful. Some it makes harder, some it makes kinder. The lucky ones find a way to be both when necessary. At the livery, they parted ways with arrangements to meet for supper before he returned to Silverleaf. Virgil gathered his sparse belongings from the boarding house, settled his bill, and spent the afternoon acquiring supplies he'd need for winter. That evening at the restaurant, Dahlia joined him briefly during a lull in service. Their conversation flowed with unexpected ease, covering safe topics, the challenges of Montana winters, the growth of Whitewater Springs, books they'd both read. Virgil found himself speaking more than had become his habit, drawn out by her genuine interest and lack of pretense. Eliza likes you, she said as he prepared to leave. She wouldn't have hired you otherwise, regardless of my opinion. She seems a fair employer. She is, Dahlia hesitated, then added, Silverleaf could use stability, Virgil. Katie needs consistency after losing her father. I hope you'll consider staying beyond spring if things work out. The gentle suggestion caught him off guard. I generally don't plan that far ahead. Her smile held knowing warmth, of course. The wandering cowboy, she stood, smoothing her apron. Ride safely tonight. The moon's bright, but there's a section of road near the creek crossing that floods in rain. I'll be careful. As he rode toward Silverleaf under a canopy of stars, Virgil acknowledged the unusual sense of anticipation he felt. For the first time in years, he was riding toward something rather than away. The following weeks established a rhythm that surprised Virgil with its ease. The Silverleaf hands, 3 seasoned cowboys and 2 younger men, responded well to his leadership. His experience with Montana winters proved valuable as they prepared stock for the coming cold, repairing shelter, organizing feed stores, and identifying which cattle might need special attention. Eliza Blackwell proved both capable and reasonable. She understood cattle and expected to be consulted on decisions, but she respected Virgil's expertise. Their working relationship developed into a mutual respect that made daily operations smooth. Katie adopted him immediately as a source of entertainment, following him around the ranch yard whenever chores allowed, peppering him with questions about horses and cattle. Her uninhibited curiosity reminded him of a younger version of himself before family tragedy had rewritten his path. It was Dahlia, however, who presented the greatest challenge to Virgil's carefully maintained emotional distance. She rode out to Silverleaf several times weekly, ostensibly to help with accounts and bring supplies. During those visits, she often sought him out, bringing coffee during cold mornings or engaging him in conversation that ventured beyond ranch matters. One afternoon in early December, he found her in the barn examining a newly acquired mare. Snow had begun falling that morning, the first substantial storm of the season. "You should have waited," he said, stamping snow from his boots as he entered. "The road will be treacherous for your return." Dahlia turned, her cheeks flushed from the cold. "I needed to bring Eliza's order from the mercantile before the storm worsened. Besides, I've traveled this road in far worse conditions. Still, it's risky traveling alone." Her expression softened with amusement. "Are you concerned for my welfare, Virgil Prentice?" The question, though lightly asked, struck uncomfortably close to truth. Over the past weeks, he'd found himself watching for her visits with an anticipation that warned of dangerous attachment. "Anyone would be concerned about a woman riding alone in a snowstorm," he deflected. "Perhaps I won't risk returning tonight. I can stay in my old room." She patted the mare's neck. "What do you think of Eliza's new purchase?" "Good bloodlines, sound legs. She'll produce valuable foals if bred to the right stallion." They discussed horses as they walked from the barn toward the main house, snow swirling around them. Virgil was conscious of Dahlia's proximity, the way she instinctively moved closer as the wind gusted. Such natural, unguarded gestures continually undermined his practiced detachment. That evening, a full blizzard descended on Silverleaf. With travel impossible, the hands gathered in the bunkhouse while Virgil joined the Blackwell family in the main house for supper at Eliza's insistence. "No sense in you trudging through drifts to the foreman's cabin," she'd said practically. "Besides, Katie has been asking all day when you'd return from checking the north pasture." The domestic scene both comforted and disquieted him. Katie dominated conversation with stories from her lessons. Eliza, more relaxed in her home than during work hours, revealed a dry humor Virgil hadn't previously witnessed. And Dahlia settled comfortably at the table as if she belonged there, which, he reminded himself, she did, watched him with occasional glances that suggested she saw more than he intended to reveal. After Katie's bedtime, the adults gathered in the parlor where a fire blazed against the howling storm. Eliza busied herself with mending while Dahlia retrieved a book of poetry from the shelves. "Do you read poetry, Virgil?" she asked, settling into an armchair near the fire. "Not for many years." "Pity, words can transport us even when blizzards confine our bodies." She opened the volume. "This is Tennyson. James loved these poems. He used to read them aloud on winter nights." The mention of the deceased Mr. Blackwell brought a shadow to Eliza's face, though she continued her mending without comment. "I'm afraid my education was practical rather than literary," Virgil said. Dahlia's smile held gentle challenge. "Then allow me to remedy that deficiency." She began to read, her voice clear and expressive without theatricality. Virgil found himself drawn into the rhythms and images, tales of knights and honor, love and sacrifice. The storm's howl provided a fitting background to verses about struggle and perseverance. When she finished a particularly moving passage, Virgil noticed Eliza had set aside her mending and was staring into the fire, lost in memory. "James read that one the night before he left for Helena," she said softly. "His last trip." Dahlia closed the book. "I'm sorry, Eliza, I shouldn't have." "No," Eliza shook her head. "It's good to remember. 2 years is long enough to avoid his favorite poems." The intimate family moment made Virgil acutely aware of his outsider status. He stood. "I should check the barn before turning in." "In this weather?" Dahlia looked concerned. "Surely it can wait until morning." "New mare might be unsettled by the storm. Won't take long." Outside, the blizzard's fury provided welcome physical distraction from unsettling emotions. Virgil fought through knee-deep drifts to the barn, where he found the animals predictably restless but secure. He spent longer than necessary checking each stall, mentally reciting the practical reasons he must maintain distance from the Blackwell household, particularly from Dahlia Bennett with her perceptive gaze and disarming directness. When he finally returned to the house, he found Dahlia alone in the parlor, adding wood to the fire. Eliza went up to check on Katie, she explained. The storm frightens her sometimes. Virgil nodded, suddenly aware of his snow-dampened clothing and the domestic intimacy of the scene. Animals are fine, I should get some rest. Virgil, her voice stopped him at the doorway. May I ask you something personal? The question he'd been dreading. You can ask. What are you running from? Of all possible inquiries, this one, direct yet unspecific, caught him unprepared. What makes you think I'm running? Experience, observation. She stood, moving closer. You carry yourself like a man accustomed to watching exits. You answer personal questions with deflections. You maintain careful distance from everyone, even while performing your duties perfectly. The assessment was unnervingly accurate. Some men prefer solitude. Some do, but you don't strike me as one of them. You watch our family with longing, not disinterest. The observation struck too close to truth. Virgil felt ancient defenses rising. My past is my own concern, Miss Bennett. Of course. I apologize for the intrusion. Her expression held no offense, only gentle understanding that somehow wounded more than anger would have. Whatever it is, Virgil Prentice, I hope someday you'll trust someone enough to share the burden. With that, she wished him good night and ascended the stairs, leaving Virgil alone with the crackling fire and the howling storm, both easier to face than the emotions her words had stirred. The blizzard lasted 3 days, transforming Silverleaf into an isolated island amid a sea of white. During that time, Virgil maintained professional distance, focusing on ranch necessities, ensuring animals were fed, water sources remained accessible, and structures withstood the weather's assault. He took meals with the hands rather than the family, citing the need to coordinate work assignments. If Dahlia noticed his deliberate avoidance, she gave no sign during their necessary interactions. When the storm finally cleared, leaving behind a pristine landscape and brilliant blue skies, Dahlia prepared to return to town. The restaurant will need attention after 3 days' absence, she explained as Virgil helped harness the sleigh that would transport her over snow-covered roads. The trail might still have drifts, he warned. I should ride ahead to ensure safe passage. That's thoughtful but unnecessary. Cooper will have cleared the main road by now. She adjusted her heavy coat. Besides, I've managed these winters my entire life. At least take Jenkins with you, he insisted, referring to one of the younger hands. Something in her expression softened at his concern. Very well. If it will ease your mind. As she settled into the sleigh, she fixed him with a direct look. Will you come to town for the Christmas gathering next week? Eliza mentioned the hands would rotate duty so everyone could attend for at least part of the evening. Christmas. He'd nearly forgotten the approaching holiday, having spent so many alone. I haven't decided. You should come. The whole town gathers at the meeting hall. There's music, food, dancing. Her smile held warmth despite the frigid air. Everyone belongs at Christmas, Virgil, even wandering cowboys. With that, she signaled the horse forward, Jenkins following on horseback, leaving Virgil to wonder when exactly Dahlia Bennett had begun to penetrate the careful walls he'd maintained for years. The week before Christmas brought clear weather and increased activity at Silverleaf. Eliza oversaw preparations of gifts and food contributions for the town's celebration while managing ranch operations with her usual efficiency. You'll need to select 2 hands to remain here Christmas Eve, she instructed Virgil during their morning meeting. The rest can attend the gathering in shifts. You're welcome to join us, of course. Thank you. I'll consider it. Her shrewd gaze assessed him. Dahlia would be disappointed if you didn't appear. The direct statement caught him off guard. I'm sure Miss Bennett has plenty of friends in Whitewater. She does. But few who interest her as you seem to. Eliza set aside the account book she'd been reviewing. My sister is perceptive about people, Mr. Prentice. She sees worth where others might miss it. Before Virgil could respond to this unexpected observation, Katie burst into the room, excited about decorations for the Christmas tree. The moment passed, but Eliza's words lingered, disrupting the careful emotional distance Virgil had maintained since arriving at Silverleaf. On Christmas Eve, fresh snow dusted Whitewater Springs as Virgil rode into town alongside the Blackwell sleigh. He'd finally yielded to the combined persuasion of Eliza, Katie, and his own inexplicable reluctance to disappoint Dahlia. The town meeting hall blazed with light and decorations. Pine boughs and red ribbons adorned doors and windows. Inside, a massive tree dominated one corner, decorated with paper ornaments, strings of berries, and small candles. Tables laden with food lined one wall while an area had been cleared for dancing. It seemed the entire settlement had gathered, ranchers, townspeople, and even travelers passing through. The sheriff nodded to Virgil as he entered with the Blackwell family. Cooper from the livery raised a cup in greeting. Merchants and customers who normally exchanged only brief pleasantries now mingled freely, united by the holiday spirit. Virgil remained near the entrance, instinctively positioning himself where he could observe without fully participating. Years of vigilance had ingrained the habit of watching for signs of recognition or whispers that might indicate his family name had been connected to its bloody history. "You came," Dahlia's voice drew his attention. She stood before him in a dress of deep blue velvet, her honey-blonde hair arranged in a more elaborate style than her usual practical arrangement. A small silver pendant glinted at her throat. "I said I might," he replied, suddenly aware of how formal his posture must appear compared to the relaxed gathering. "And here you are." Her smile held genuine pleasure. "Have you eaten?" "The tables are filled with everyone's contributions." "Not yet." "Then allow me to guide you through the offerings. Mrs. Peterson's spice cake is legendary, but avoid Reverend Wallace's pickled eggs unless you enjoy sleepless nights." Her light manner drew a reluctant smile. "Speaking from experience. Painfully acquired knowledge I'm generously sharing. Come." She led him through the crowded room, greeting neighbors and introducing Virgil to those he hadn't yet met through ranch business. Her easy social grace created a buffer that allowed him to relax marginally, though he remained conscious of maintaining his guarded history. The evening progressed with community rituals, carols led by the schoolteacher, recitations by children including an enthusiastic Katie, and finally dancing as several townsmen produced fiddles and an accordion. Virgil observed from the periphery as Dahlia moved through these activities, at home among people who clearly valued her. Several young men sought her hand for dances, which she accepted with friendly grace. Yet repeatedly throughout the evening her gaze found his across the room, as if checking that he remained. During a lively reel, Eliza joined him near the refreshment table. "You dance, Mr. Prentice." "Not for many years, Mrs. Blackwell." She nodded, watching her daughter twirl with the blacksmith's son. "Before James died, these gatherings were my favorite part of life in Whitewater. Now they're bittersweet." "Loss changes celebrations," he offered, thinking of his own abandoned traditions. "It does," she studied him with that direct Blackwell gaze. "You understand personal tragedy, I think." Instead of the defensive withdrawal such observations usually triggered, Virgil found himself nodding. "Everyone carries something." "True. But not everyone carries it alone." Her gaze shifted meaningfully toward Dahlia, now laughing as she completed a dance with Cooper's nephew. "Sometimes the greatest gift we can offer another person is the chance to help bear our burdens." Before he could respond to this unexpected philosophy, Eliza excused herself to help serve the Christmas punch. Moments later, Dahlia approached, cheeks flushed from dancing. "Will you walk with me? I need fresh air after that last reel." Outside, the night had turned perfectly clear, stars brilliant against the black sky. Their breath formed clouds in the cold air as they strolled along the main street, now silent except for distant music and laughter from the hall. "Are you enjoying the evening?" she asked. "More than I expected," he admitted. High praise from a man who clearly planned to endure rather than enjoy. Her teasing drew a genuine laugh. "You're very direct, Miss Bennett." "Dahlia," she corrected. "And yes, life's too uncertain for excessive delicacy. My parents' sudden passing taught me that." They walked in comfortable silence before stopping near the church, its simple steeple silhouetted against starlight. "Christmas makes me think of possibilities," Dahlia said softly. "What might be rather than what has been. Some pasts can't be escaped so easily." "I didn't say escaped, integrated perhaps, accepted as part of our story without letting it write our ending." The insight struck unnervingly close to his private struggles. Virgil studied her profile, wondering what experiences had shaped such wisdom in someone so young. You speak from experience. Different from yours, I suspect, but yes, she turned to face him fully. We lost our parents to influenza when I was 18. Eliza had just married James and moved here. I was engaged to a man who decided a wife with no family connections and inheritance offered insufficient advantages. The matter-of-fact delivery of painful history surprised him. I'm sorry. It was a blessing disguised as tragedy. He would have made a terrible husband. Her smile held no bitterness. But it taught me about the weight of unexpected loss and how some respond by closing themselves away while others reach outward. In the starlight, with her direct gaze and unguarded manner, Dahlia Bennett presented a vision of what Virgil had convinced himself couldn't exist, someone who had faced loss yet remained open to life's possibilities. Music drifted from the meeting hall as the band struck up a slower waltz. Would you dance with me, Virgil? She asked simply, here under the stars. The request should have activated his caution, but something about the Christmas night and her straightforward manner bypassed his defenses. He offered his hand and she stepped into a proper dance position. There on Whitewater's Main Street, with snow crunching beneath their feet and their breath mingling in the cold air, Virgil danced for the first time in 7 years. Dahlia followed his lead with natural grace, neither pressing for undue closeness nor maintaining artificial distance. When the music ended, they remained momentarily connected, her gloved hand in his, her blue eyes reflecting starlight. The impulse to kiss her rose with unexpected force, and with it the harsh reality of all he concealed. We should return, he said, releasing her hand. Your sister will wonder where you've gone. Something like disappointment flickered across her face before she nodded. Of course. They walked back in silence that had lost its earlier comfort, each absorbed in private thoughts. At the meeting hall entrance she paused. Merry Christmas, Virgil Prentice. Thank you for the dance. Before he could respond, she disappeared into the warm light and music, leaving him with the disquieting certainty that Dahlia Bennett was becoming dangerously important to a man who couldn't afford attachments. The weeks following Christmas brought bitter cold to Montana. Ranch work focused on survival, breaking ice on water sources, delivering feed to snowbound cattle, maintaining shelters against howling winds. The demanding conditions left little opportunity for social interactions beyond necessary communication. Dahlia's visits to Silverleaf became less frequent as winter travel grew more treacherous. When she did appear, usually accompanying supply deliveries from town, their interactions remained cordial but contained a new reserve that Virgil told himself was for the best. By February, when a brief thaw allowed easier travel, Virgil had convinced himself that any connection beyond professional respect had been mostly imagined. The Christmas dance under the stars seemed like something from another life, a momentary lapse in judgment best forgotten. Then came the night that changed everything. A late winter storm had descended without warning, catching Virgil in two hands as they finished repairs on a distant line shack. They'd secured the horses in the shack's small attached shelter and prepared to wait out the blizzard, having sent word to Silverleaf about their delayed return. The second night of their confinement, as wind screamed around the sturdy walls, Jenkins burst in from checking the horses. Riders approaching, he shouted over the storm's fury. 2, maybe 3. Virgil grabbed his rifle and peered through the single window. Through swirling snow, he could barely make out mounted figures struggling toward the shack. Might be lost travelers, he said, or it could be the Hadley gang. They've been hitting isolated ranches north of here. The 3 men positioned themselves strategically as hooves approached and voices called out. When a woman's voice rose above the wind, Virgil's blood turned colder than the Montana night. Hello, the shack, is anyone there? That's Miss Bennett, Jenkins exclaimed. Virgil was already moving, throwing open the door against the wind's resistance. 3 figures on horseback emerged from the swirling white, Cooper from the livery, one of his stable hands, and between them, Dahlia Bennett, nearly unrecognizable beneath layers of snow-covered clothing. Get inside, Virgil shouted, helping Dahlia dismount. Her body was rigid with cold, her movements clumsy even through heavy gloves. The men followed with the horses, cramming the animals into the already crowded shelter attached to the shack. Inside, Virgil guided Dahlia to the single chair beside the small stove while Cooper explained their presence. Telegram came from Helena right after you fellas left yesterday. Miss Bennett insisted on delivering it immediately, said it was urgent business for Silverleaf. He shook his head. We were halfway here when the storm hit, couldn't turn back. Virgil knelt before Dahlia, removing her snow-encrusted hat and scarf. Her face was frightening, pale with alarming blue-tinged lips. Get those wet things off her, he ordered. Jenkins, more wood for the fire. Anderson, heat water. As the men moved to these tasks, Virgil focused on Dahlia, whose shivering had progressed to violent trembling. Can you speak? He asked, working to remove her frozen gloves. Telegram, she managed through chattering teeth. Eliza needs. That can wait, we need to warm you first. He shed his own coat and wrapped it around her shoulders after removing her sodden outer garments. You're showing signs of serious cold exposure. Working efficiently, they managed to replace her wet clothing with dry blankets and position her near the stove. Cooper produced a flask of whiskey from which Virgil administered small sips to help warm her from within. Gradually, color returned to her face, though the violent shivering continued. What were you thinking? Virgil demanded when she seemed more coherent, riding out in threatening weather. Despite her condition, Dahlia's gaze held determination. The telegram, important from Helena Bank, foreclosure threat. This caught everyone's attention. Cooper looked especially concerned. Silverleaf's in financial trouble. No, Dahlia managed more clearly, clerical error. But deadline for response, tomorrow, papers needed signing. Virgil fought frustration and relief in equal measure. You risked your life for paperwork. Eliza would lose everything, her voice strengthened. Worth the risk. As the storm howled outside, they created makeshift pallets around the stove. Cooper and his hand took the first watch over the horses while Jenkins and Anderson claimed corners of the shack. Virgil insisted Dahlia take the single narrow cot while he prepared to sleep on the floor beside the stove. In the dim light of banked coals, with the others sleeping or outside with the horses, Dahlia's voice reached him softly. I'm sorry to have caused trouble. You nearly died in a blizzard for Silverleaf, that's beyond trouble. The ranch is everything to Eliza and Katie. Without it, she left the thought unfinished. Virgil stared at the ceiling. There are other ranches, other towns. Says the man who carries no roots. Despite her exhaustion, a hint of her usual directness emerged. Some of us need connection to place and people. It anchors us through life's storms. The metaphor seemed painfully apt as wind rattled the shack's walls. Virgil remained silent, wondering what it might feel like to value something so deeply that risking one's life seemed reasonable. Thank you, she added softly, for taking care of me. Get some rest, we'll need to ride back once the storm breaks. He thought she drifted to sleep until her voice came again, barely audible above the wind. I've never been so cold. I thought I might die out there. The vulnerability in her admission struck deeper than he expected. Virgil rose and moved to kneel beside the cot, finding her eyes open, reflecting the stove's dim glow. You're safe now, he said with quiet certainty. I won't let anything happen to you. Her cold fingers found his in the darkness. I believe you. Something fundamental shifted in that moment, a recognition that despite his careful emotional distance, Dahlia Bennett had become someone whose safety mattered to him more than his own. The realization was both exhilarating and terrifying. He remained beside her until her breathing deepened into sleep, her hand still clasping his as if even unconscious, she sensed his need to ensure her well-being. The storm broke by morning. After assessing that Dahlia had suffered no lasting effects beyond exhaustion, they began the journey back to Silverleaf. The return trip through deep snow was slow but uneventful, the bright sun creating a glittering landscape that belied the previous night's danger. At the ranch, Eliza rushed from the house at their approach, face tight with worry that dissolved into relief upon seeing her sister. Thank God, she breathed, helping Dahlia from her horse. When Cooper's boy said you'd left before the storm. I'm fine, Dahlia assured her, thanks to Virgil and the others. Eliza's grateful gaze included all the men, but lingered on Virgil. Thank you for bringing her home safely. After ensuring the horses were properly tended, Virgil headed to his cabin, physically and emotionally exhausted. The night had forced confrontation with truths he'd been avoiding, primarily that his feelings for Dahlia Bennett had progressed far beyond admiration or attraction to something deeper and more dangerous for a man with his past. He was washing trail dust from his face when a knock interrupted his thoughts. Opening the door, he found Eliza Blackwell standing there, telegram in hand. "May I come in?" "There's something we need to discuss." The formal request surprised him, of course. She entered, declining his offer to sit. "I've just read this telegram Dahlia risked her life to deliver. It's from my banker in Helena. She mentioned something about a foreclosure threat." "Yes, though that's not the most interesting part." Eliza's steady gaze fixed on him. "The banker mentions being approached by a man asking questions about Silverleaf's financial standing. A man specifically interested in whether James Blackwell's widow might be vulnerable to pressure." Virgil waited, sensing where this might lead. The banker doesn't know the man's name but described him as claiming connection to the Prentice family of Colorado. Her voice remained steady. "Would you know anything about that, Mr. Prentice?" The moment he'd dreaded since arriving in Whitewater had finally materialized. Virgil met her gaze directly, "Not specifically, but I can guess." "I'd appreciate enlightenment." With resignation, he gestured toward the cabin's 2 chairs. "This may take some time." For the next hour, Virgil revealed the history he'd concealed for years. How his father, Marshall Prentice, had built a cattle empire in Colorado through increasingly ruthless methods. How his older brother Clayton had followed their father's path while Virgil, the younger son, had grown increasingly disturbed by family business practices that included intimidation, violence, and occasionally murder disguised as accident. "When I was 19, they targeted a small rancher who refused to sell water rights, made it look like a robbery gone wrong, killed him and his wife." Virgil's voice hardened with the memory. "I couldn't pretend anymore. Confronted my father with what I knew." "What happened?" Eliza asked quietly. "He offered me a choice, fall in line or disappear. Said if I went to authorities, no one would believe me against the Prentice name. And if I tried, I wouldn't live to testify." "Your own father threatened your life." "My father considered family loyalty absolute, betrayal unforgivable." The bitter irony wasn't lost on him. "I left that night. Changed my appearance, worked my way north. Kept moving whenever I sensed someone might connect me to the Prentice name." Eliza studied him. "And now your family is making inquiries about Silverleaf." "Most likely my brother Clayton. My father died 3 years ago according to a newspaper I saw." Virgil's jaw tightened. "Clayton always wanted to expand northward. If he's looking at Silverleaf, it's not for legitimate business." "Why tell me this now?" "Because Dahlia nearly died delivering that telegram. Because whatever game Clayton's playing puts this ranch and your family at risk." He met her gaze directly. "And because you deserve to know who you've hired." Eliza was silent for a long moment, processing this revelation. Finally she asked, "Does Dahlia know any of this?" "No, I've told no one until now." Another thoughtful silence followed before Eliza stood. "Thank you for your honesty, Mr. Prentice. I'll need time to consider what this means for Silverleaf." "I understand if you want me to leave." The words cost him more than he'd anticipated. "That may be premature. For now, continue your duties while I think." She moved toward the door then turned back. "One more question. Did you seek employment here knowing your family might target Silverleaf?" "No, the connection is coincidence." He hesitated, then added, "But now that I know, I can help protect against whatever Clayton's planning." Eliza nodded once, her expression unreadable, and departed, leaving Virgil to wonder if he'd just destroyed the first place that had begun to feel like home in 7 years. The following days passed in tense uncertainty. Virgil continued managing ranch operations while Eliza maintained cordial but reserved interactions. He hadn't seen Dahlia since their return, assuming she'd gone back to town once recovered from the ordeal. A week after his confession to Eliza, Virgil returned from checking cattle to find Dahlia waiting outside his cabin, bundled against the February chill. "Miss Bennett," he greeted her formally, dismounting with caution born of uncertainty about how much Eliza might have shared. "You're back to Miss Bennett now." Her directness hadn't diminished. "After everything." He secured his horse to the hitching post. Formality seemed appropriate given circumstances. You mean given that my sister now knows you're the estranged son of a notorious cattle baron? When he stiffened in surprise, she added, Eliza and I don't keep secrets from each other. Then you understand why distance is best. No, I don't, she stepped closer. What I understand is that you've spent years punishing yourself for a family legacy you rejected. Her perception was unsettling. It's not that simple. Isn't it? You walked away from wealth and power because you couldn't stomach injustice. You've lived as a drifting cowhand rather than compromise your principles. Her blue eyes held his. Those aren't actions that warrant punishment, Virgil. The absolution in her voice threatened the walls he'd maintained for years. My family has destroyed lives, is possibly targeting yours now. The Prentice name carries blood. But you don't. That's the difference? She stepped closer, her expression softening. The night in the line shack I saw the real Virgil Prentice, a man who protects rather than threatens, who serves rather than dominates. The memory of her vulnerable in the storm's aftermath weakened his resolve to maintain distance. Dahlia, you don't understand the danger. I understand that a good man is needlessly exiling himself from connection. She touched his arm lightly. And I understand that Eliza has authorized me to invite you to supper tonight to discuss how we might address your brother's interest in Silverleaf. The unexpected turn surprised him. She wants my help. She recognizes valuable insight when it's available. A smile warmed Dahlia's face. 7 o'clock, don't be late. As she turned to leave, Virgil called after her, Why are you doing this? After learning who I am. She looked back, her expression serious. Because who you are and who your family is aren't the same thing, some of us can recognize the difference. That evening in the Blackwell dining room, with Katie excused to the kitchen where the housekeeper supervised her dessert, Eliza laid out what she'd learned from further investigation. Your brother has been systematically acquiring struggling ranches throughout the territory, she explained. The bank confirmed Clayton Prentice made inquiries about Silverleaf's mortgage and my late husband's debts. Which we don't have, Dahlia interjected. James was careful with finances. But Clayton doesn't know that, Virgil noted. He's fishing for vulnerability. Eliza nodded. The banker believes he may approach us directly soon with an offer to buy. When he does, refuse. Virgil's voice hardened with certainty. Any legitimate offer would be followed by increasing pressure, accidents with stock, mysterious fires, threats to hands. You sound certain, Eliza observed. I watched the pattern for years. Clayton's methods mirror our father's. The women exchanged glances before Dahlia spoke. We've been discussing a countermeasure, one that might discourage your brother's interest permanently. What kind of countermeasure? Eliza straightened in her chair. A business partnership that would make Silverleaf less isolated and therefore less vulnerable. With whom? With you, Dahlia answered quietly. Virgil stared, certain he'd misunderstood. That makes no sense. Actually, it makes perfect sense, Eliza countered. You know your brother's methods, you understand ranching, and a formal partnership with the Prentice name, even the estranged son, would signal that Silverleaf isn't as defenseless as Clayton might assume. You'd trust me with partial ownership after what I told you. I'm practical, Mr. Prentice. Your actions these past months speak more convincingly than your family history. Eliza's direct gaze held his. Besides, you saved my sister's life. That earns significant consideration. The offer stunned him, not just for its unexpectedness, but for what it represented. Trust, belonging, permanence, everything he'd convinced himself was forever beyond reach. I have no capital to invest, he said finally. Your knowledge and labor are adequate initial investment, Eliza replied. We can formalize percentage ownership through contract. Dahlia had remained quiet during this exchange, though her hopeful expression spoke volumes. Now she added, it would mean staying, Virgil. Committing to Silverleaf and Whitewater. The implication hung in the air between them that his commitment might extend beyond business partnership. The possibility both terrified and attracted him with equal force. I need time to consider, he finally said. This is unexpected. Of course, Eliza agreed, but don't take too long. If Clayton Prentice is moving systematically through the territory, we should solidify our position before he reaches us. Later, as Virgil prepared to return to his cabin, Dahlia accompanied him to the porch. Stars glittered in the clear February sky, their light reflecting off snow-covered pastures. "You're quiet," she observed. "It's a lot to process." The partnership or the idea of belonging somewhere. Her perception continued to unsettle him, both. "I've spent years avoiding attachment. I've noticed," her breath formed clouds in the cold air. "May I ask why, beyond the obvious concerns about your family?" The question penetrated deeper than she could know. Virgil stared across the snowy landscape, weighing how much truth to reveal. When you leave everything behind, family, history, even your full name, you learn that attachments are dangerous. People ask questions. They expect consistency, background stories, connections. So you became the eternal stranger, always passing through, never staying long enough for anyone to look closely. He nodded. "Safer that way." "Safer, perhaps. But lonely," her voice softened. "And now? Now I'm being offered exactly what I convinced myself I could never have." He turned to face her. "It's disorienting." Dahlia stepped closer, her expression earnest in the starlight. "You know, the most amazing thing about walls is that the same effort it takes to maintain them could be used to build something else instead. Something that shelters without isolating." The metaphor struck with unexpected force. Before he could respond, the front door opened as Eliza called for Dahlia, breaking the moment. With a gentle touch to his arm, she left him with his thoughts, which remained tumultuous long into the night. 3 days later, as Virgil returned from the south pasture, he spotted an unfamiliar carriage approaching Silverleaf's main house. Even at a distance, something about the expensive vehicle and matched team raised his guard. Virgil altered course to intercept the visitors, arriving at the house just as a well-dressed man, approximately his own age, descended from the carriage, followed by two rough-looking companions who remained mounted on horses behind the vehicle. The man turned at Virgil's approach, revealing features that despite 7 years' separation were disturbingly familiar: the same strong jaw and straight nose, though harder eyes and a calculating expression Virgil remembered all too well. "Clayton," he said flatly, dismounting. His brother's momentary shock dissolved into a cold smile. "Well, fate has interesting timing. The prodigal brother appears just as I'm expanding our father's vision northward." "Your vision, not his. And I'm not here by chance." "No, last I heard you were working as a common ranch hand somewhere in Wyoming." Clayton's gaze swept over Virgil's practical clothing. "Doesn't appear your circumstances have improved." Before Virgil could respond, the front door opened and Eliza emerged, her expression carefully neutral as she assessed the situation. "Mrs. Blackwell," Clayton turned with practiced charm. "Clayton Prentice, I sent word from Helena that I'd be calling to discuss a business proposition." "Mr. Prentice," Eliza's tone revealed nothing as she glanced between the brothers. "I see you've met our foreman." "Foreman?" Clayton's smile didn't reach his eyes. "An interesting development, though I believe my brother's talents are wasted in such a limited position." "Former position," Virgil corrected, moving to stand beside Eliza. "Mrs. Blackwell and I recently finalized a partnership agreement. I now own 20% of Silverleaf Ranch." The statement was premature. They discussed terms but signed no papers. But Virgil had made his decision the previous night, and Eliza's slight nod confirmed her willingness to support the claim. Clayton's expression hardened. "A partnership with a Prentice." "With Virgil specifically," Eliza replied smoothly. "His management has proven invaluable." A calculating look entered Clayton's eyes. "I see. Well, family connections make my proposition even more appropriate. I'm prepared to make a generous offer for Silverleaf, well above market value." "The ranch isn't for sale," Virgil stated flatly. "To you or anyone." "Everyone has a price, brother, even your partner." Clayton's gaze shifted to Eliza. "Perhaps we should discuss details privately, Mrs. Blackwell. Family disagreements needn't concern you." "Mr. Prentice speaks for Silverleaf as well as himself," Eliza replied coolly, "and as he said, we're not interested in selling." Clayton's charm evaporated, revealing the ruthlessness Virgil remembered. "That's unfortunate." The cattle business can be dangerous, accidents happen, especially to operations without sufficient protection. The veiled threat hung in the air until Virgil stepped forward, his voice low but carrying clearly. Let me be absolutely clear, Clayton. Any action against Silverleaf or the Blackwell family will be met with consequences you can't imagine. You's threatening me, Clayton laughed without humor. The brother who couldn't stomach necessary business methods. The brother who knows every detail of those methods and has documented them extensively. Virgil's bluff carried the conviction of absolute truth. Materials held by attorneys to be released to territorial authorities should anything unfortunate occur here. This gave Clayton visible pause. You're bluffing. Test me and discover how thoroughly I prepared before disappearing. Virgil stepped closer. I didn't just run, brother, I ensured I could never be silenced. The standoff stretched until Clayton's expression shifted to cold assessment. You've changed. Yes, I found something worth protecting. Virgil held his brother's gaze. Leave Silverleaf alone, leave the territory in fact. There's nothing for you here but trouble. For a moment, Virgil thought Clayton might challenge him further. Instead, his brother gave a tight nod. Perhaps I've misjudged the situation. Montana may present more complications than anticipated. Without further farewell, Clayton returned to his carriage. As the vehicle pulled away, his final words drifted back. Family's a curious thing, isn't it? Never quite what you expect. Virgil and Eliza remained silent until the carriage disappeared down the road. Finally, she turned to him. Is it true about the documentation? No, he admitted, but Clayton doesn't know that. He can't risk exposure. Too many powerful people would be implicated alongside him. Eliza nodded thoughtfully. Do you believe he'll abandon his interest in Silverleaf? For now, Clayton calculates risk carefully. He'll find easier targets, Virgil gazed after the departed carriage, but we should remain vigilant. Wait. He met her questioning look directly. If the partnership offer still stands, I'd like to accept. A smile transformed her normally reserved expression. The papers are already drawn up. I had faith in your decision. As they walked toward the house, Virgil felt a weight lifting, not completely gone, but lighter than it had been in 7 years. The confrontation with Clayton had forced recognition of how much Silverleaf and its people had come to matter. Dahlia will be pleased, Eliza remarked as they reached the porch. She's been quite insistent that you belong here. The comment warmed something long cold within him. Where is she today? In town, the restaurant needed attention. Eliza paused at the door. Though I expect she'd appreciate hearing your decision directly. The suggestion wasn't subtle, but Virgil found he no longer needed to fight against connection. I believe I have business in town this afternoon. I believe you do, Eliza agreed with the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. Virgil rode toward Whitewater Springs with purpose that had nothing to do with ranch supplies. The confrontation with Clayton had crystallized truths he'd been avoiding, primarily that his feelings for Dahlia Bennett had grown from attraction to something deeper and more permanent. The restaurant was busy with the midday meal when he arrived. Virgil waited near the entrance, watching as Dahlia moved efficiently among the tables, her blonde hair neatly pinned beneath a small cap, her blue dress protected by a pristine apron. Even in routine work, she carried herself with dignity and warmth that drew people naturally. When she finally noticed him, her smile of surprised pleasure sent an unfamiliar sensation through his chest, hope, perhaps, or the recognition of possibility where he'd long seen only closed doors. Virgil, I didn't expect you in town today. I needed to speak with you when you have a moment. Her gaze sharpened with concern. Has something happened at Silverleaf? Is Eliza all right? Everyone's fine. It's good news, actually. Relief crossed her face. Give me 10 minutes to arrange coverage and we can talk. True to her word, Dahlia soon joined him, removing her apron as they stepped outside into the crisp March afternoon. Without discussion, they walked toward the small park that marked the center of Whitewater Springs. Your brother visited Silverleaf today, Virgil began without preamble. Dahlia's steps faltered. Clayton. Was there trouble? Some tense moments, but no violence. He described the confrontation briefly. I believe he'll move on to easier targets, at least for now. That's wonderful news, she studied his expression. But there's more, isn't there? They reached a bench overlooking the frozen pond at the park's center. Virgil gestured for her to sit, then joined her, gathering his thoughts. I've accepted Eliza's partnership offer, he said finally. I'm staying at Silverleaf. In Whitewater. The joy that illuminated her face affected him more deeply than he'd anticipated. Truly, you're staying permanently. Yes, he took a breath, forcing himself to continue with the honesty she deserved, and I hoped. That is, I wanted to ask if you might consider. Words failed him. After years of careful speech and emotional distance, expressing genuine feeling proved more difficult than facing down his brother. Dahlia saved him as she had so often these past months. She placed her hand gently over his. Virgil Prentice, are you attempting to court me? The directness that had first drawn him to her now provided the opening he needed. Yes, though I'm out of practice with such matters, if you'd prefer someone with less complicated history. Stop, her interruption was gentle but firm. If you're going to offer reasons why I shouldn't care for you, I'd rather you didn't. I've made my own assessment. And what is that assessment? Her blue eyes held his steadily. That you are honorable, kind, and brave, that you carry wounds from your past without allowing them to corrupt your character. That despite years trying to convince yourself otherwise, you long for connection and belonging as much as anyone. Each observation struck with uncomfortable accuracy. You've seen a great deal. I pay attention to what matters. Her hand remained on his, warm despite the cold day. And you matter to me, Virgil, more than I expected when you first walked into my restaurant. The admission created an opening for what he'd come to say. When Clayton threatened Silverleaf today, I realized something I've been avoiding for months. I care about the ranch, about Eliza and Katie, about this town. He turned his hand to clasp hers properly. But mostly, I care about you, Dahlia, in ways I convinced myself weren't possible for someone with my history. Her smile contained both joy and gentle exasperation. Of course they're possible. Caring isn't some privilege reserved for those with uncomplicated pasts. It's what makes us human, especially on the frontier where life is hardest. The wisdom in her words penetrated years of self-imposed isolation. Virgil found himself smiling, a real smile without reservation or caution. In that case, Miss Bennett, would you allow me to court you properly, with all the accompanying dinner invitations, chaperoned walks, and eventual scandalized gossip that a small town provides? Her laughter rang in the clear air. Mr. Prentice, I would be delighted, though I warn you, Eliza takes her chaperoning duties very seriously. I'll remember that. He stood, offering his arm in a gesture that felt both foreign and natural. May I escort you back to your establishment? You may, she rose and took his arm, adding with characteristic directness, and you may kiss me if you're so inclined. Just this once before the formal courtship begins. The invitation required no further encouragement. There in Whitewater's public park, Virgil Prentice kissed Dahlia Bennett for the first time, a gentle, proper kiss that nevertheless contained promise of deeper connection to come. When they parted, her eyes remained closed momentarily, a soft smile playing on her lips. Well, she said when she finally looked at him, that certainly confirms my assessment. Spring arrived with its familiar cycle of mud, new growth, and increased ranch activity. Virgil settled into his partnership role with unexpected ease, finding satisfaction in building something lasting after years of transient existence. His courtship of Dahlia progressed with the season's dinner at Eliza's table twice weekly, Sunday walks after church, occasional picnics when weather permitted and Katie could be persuaded to provide chaperoning at a discreet distance. By early June, as wildflowers painted the Montana hills and calving season concluded successfully, Virgil knew with absolute certainty that his future belonged with Dahlia Bennett. The only question remaining was how to properly propose to a woman whose directness continuously disarmed his careful planning. The opportunity arose during Whitewater's annual Founders' Day celebration, a community gathering with food, music, and games to mark the town's establishment. As afternoon faded toward evening, Virgil managed to separate Dahlia from her restaurant responsibilities for a walk toward the church where they'd danced under stars at Christmas. You're unusually quiet today, she observed as they strolled. Is something troubling you? Not troubling, just important. Her perceptive gaze studied him, important enough to make you nervous. That must be significant indeed. They reached the small garden beside the church where spring roses had begun blooming. Virgil led her to a bench partially concealed by shrubbery, offering a modicum of privacy while remaining properly visible from the street. Dahlia, he took both her hands in his, finding unexpected steadiness despite his racing heart. Before I met you, I believed certain things were impossible for me: home, family, belonging. You showed me how wrong I was. Her eyes widened slightly as she realized his direction. Virgil. Please, I need to say this properly. He squeezed her hands gently. These past months have taught me that a name doesn't determine destiny, that the past can be acknowledged without controlling the future, that love, when genuine, is worth any risk. From his pocket he withdrew a small velvet box purchased during a supply run to Helena the previous month. Opening it revealed a modest diamond set in gold, sparkling in the early evening light. Dahlia Bennett, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife, of building a future together at Silverleaf and in Whitewater? Tears gathered in her blue eyes, though her smile remained brilliant. Yes. With all my heart, yes. Virgil slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that finally trembled. When he looked up, her expression held both joy and something like triumph. What? He asked, recognizing the particular gleam in her eye. I was just thinking about the first time I saw you in my restaurant. So careful, so contained. I wondered then what it would take to break through those walls. The memory brought a smile. You succeeded admirably. We succeeded, she corrected, touching his face gently. You had to be willing to let the walls come down. He turned his head to kiss her palm. I had excellent motivation. Their kiss sealed promises beyond words of partnership, family, and a future neither had expected when a wandering cowboy first entered a Montana restaurant. Later that evening, as they announced their engagement to a delighted Eliza and an ecstatic Katie, Virgil reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. From the isolated son of a ruthless cattle baron to a man surrounded by family, chosen family, but no less real for that choice. The Prentice name that had once been a burden to escape now represented something entirely different in Whitewater Springs: partnership, integrity, commitment. His father and brother had tried to write his story in blood and intimidation. Instead, Virgil had found the courage to author his own narrative, one founded on love rather than fear. As Dahlia's hand found his under the table, her engagement ring catching the lamplight, Virgil acknowledged the final truth his 7-year journey had taught him. Sometimes the longest trail leads exactly where you need to be, even when you've convinced yourself such a destination couldn't possibly exist.